Many thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Business Week here on Arise News. Now I'm joined by Damilare Adesola, who is Associate Director, Control Risk, to review some of our top stories in further details. Good morning to you, Damilare. It's great pleasure to have you on Business Week this morning. We've got quite a bit to get through, but let's begin with here in Nigeria, a 7-day nationwide strike warning that has been declared by Nigerian resident doctors. What can we make of this entire development?
So what is interesting is that if you look in the last 5-10 years, you find doctors striking ever so often. Every 6 to 9 months there's a strike, but that was usually tied to financial concerns, where it was a demand for more pay, it was a demand for better working conditions. To see them shift from having industrial strikes that are financially motivated to industrial strikes that are hinged on security concerns, I think it just goes to show the general trend of the labor market, where the brain-drain conversation or the conversation about immigration is not just about I'm seeking better financial opportunities, is the concern about security risks that are being heightened in the country at the moment. And so I think it's important for the government to not see this as an isolated event of, okay, it's just this one security incident that we need to resolve, but actually broadening that conversation and giving a bird's eye view to understand what the security trajectory and how that impacts the labor market and the brain drain. I mean, the minister came earlier in the year to say that, you know, in the last 5 years, we've had about 16,000 doctors emigrate from the country. Right now, we have about 55,000 doctors, which is a scary number, considering the fact that that means that we have about one doctor to 4,000 of the population, as opposed to 1 to 600, which is the recommended WHO ratio. So a lot of that conversation really just ties into not just the business environment now from a producer point of view, but from the laborer point of view, and making that favorable, making that seeing that the government is actually putting effort to drive this. So I think there's a level of sensitivity that the government needs to approach this from, and also be tactical as well in handling it.
Right, absolutely. And of course, to add some more color and to give some more perspective, of course, you're referring to the abduction of Dr.
Yes.
Ganiat Popola,
yes.
Who was, about 8 months ago,
Exactly.
taken away
Exactly.
alongside her husband and nephew. Could we speak to how rampant situations like this occur? Of course, there's security concerns. You know, many people only know about what has happened. This is an isolated, this is not an isolated situation, of course, we've probably seen. Could we speak to how rife the security concerns around medical professionals are?
Yes, it is. And I think it's more rife in the more remote areas. And so where we have the brain drain from Nigeria, you have the brain drain from some of these areas. So where you have, I mean, people know generally, if you want to make more money, go to Lagos. But it's not even, that's not the only concern anymore. It's that if I stay in these remote areas, I increase the chances of me or my family being kidnapped, and then it becomes a security conversation. And so you have these areas that are vulnerable, the vulnerable population, very unskilled level of labor, and everybody's moving away. So who is to service them? Who is to be the doctor in that area? And so even in the number that I gave, about 55,000, I'm sure a lot of it's concentrated in the cities and in the urban areas. And so this is then a reason why the conversation needs to be broadened beyond just looking at it as an isolated event, looking at it as, oh, these folks have come again to make a demand and sort of press the necks of the government. And yes, there's a whole conversation about their oaths, you know, and whether or not doctors should be striking. But it just shows to how important this issue is, and not to look at it as isolated and look at the individual alone, but look at just generally how it's making medical professionals in some of these remote areas feel about their safety.
Absolutely, and safety and security is really paramount. But of course, the federal government has declared that in line with extant labor laws, there will be a no work, no pay, effect to the strike. How do you suppose this will be reacted to? Of course, we need our medical professionals. We're already suffering with a brain drain issue.
So, I mean, it would probably pressure them to probably go back to work very soon. But at the same time, it then goes to show about that insensitivity. So I think that connecting the points, I mean, recently they passed, they criminalized ransom payment. And so I think some of those conversations about security is also hinged on that, where it seems as if the government isn't doing what it needs to do. And, they've made this demand, they've asked for this amount of money and nothing has been done, it hasn't been paid. And so it's like, okay, but if it was your child, if it was your relative that was there, you would not be talking about the laws and you will not be talking about all these things. You'll do anything that is within your power to do to get them out. And so I think there's a sensitivity conversation that needs to be had. And then obviously I think also putting the necessary parties in the loop of what is going on behind the scenes. So they've said that the National Security Advisor is doing all they can. What does that mean? What does all they can contain? What does this consist of? What have they done? And obviously it doesn't mean they should come out because obviously there's a security breach of information. They're not supposed to come out and say, we've actually taken 1, 2, 3 steps. But the people that on a need-to-know basis, which would be obviously family members and relatives who are also supporting this mission and have been the one feeding the information to the labor unions, those will be the folks who will then say, okay, actually, the government is actually doing something, let's, thank you guys, let's hold off. But that breach of communication isn't there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be a very necessary need for some degree of transparency in the process, just in the interest of allaying fears and, putting everybody's minds at rest. And hopefully that the legitimate concerns of the medical professionals are not undermined ultimately in this process. All right, let's move on to Nigeria's GDP growing by 3.19% year on year. Of course, in second quarter of 2024, of course, this is surely a much better situation than what we've had in the corresponding period of 2023, which is at about 2.51%.
Yeah.
What does this portend? What can we attribute all of this growth to?
So two things drove growth in the second quarter, and that was all sector and the service industry. So with the all sector, yes, all sector only contributes about 8% to the GDP, but it has vast implications for the Nigerian economy as a whole due to its contributions to export revenue, forex supply, as well as government revenue. So it makes up about 2/3 of government revenue. So the impact of that is significant. But the concern is that driving an economy driven by oil that's not where we want to be. Oil is too volatile to build an economy on. It's like building your economy on sand. And, the vulnerability of prices, the vulnerability of production, and even also the fact that it's not a labor-intensive industry. So usually when you have growth, it means that, job creation, there's an uptick in job creation. But where the growth is happening in some of these capital-intensive sectors, it doesn't translate to that many jobs. And so there's that inclusive growth that is not there. It's not sustainable and it's not inclusive. But on the other hand, yes, it's good to see the trends in service. That's where we need to go on. That's where we need to focus more on having that expansion of the service industry. A lot of the biggest economies in the world are service-driven, and that's when Nigeria needs to pivot to. So it's good to see that our financial industry is really just growing at outpaced level, at an outpaced rate compared to the rest of the economy. And so again, that's a very labor-intensive sector. That's the sector that we should be focusing all our energy on. But at the same time, it's good, but it's
marginal. It's marginal, which gives us some indication.
We'll take what we can. Yeah.
I like that you mentioned, the performance of certain sectors. Let's look a lot more granularly. So, of course, we have services contributing about 58.76% to aggregate GDP. We have agriculture at 22.61%. What can we, of course, we can't go through everything, but what can we deduce from the performance and contributions of these sectors? Services, we know we've always been very services driven. But look at agriculture, information and communication. What can we deduce from the performance of these sectors?
So I think the key thing to deduce, again, like I said, that we're still all driven. It's still an all-driven economy, but some of the drivers of growth is then shifting a little more to financial services and just services in general. And so the concern for me would then be, yes, driving services is good, but what is happening with our industry? What is happening with that sector that is producing, that productive sector? Because we still have concerns about being import dependent. And it's not the service industry that's going to take us away from that import dependence. It's the industry. And that is the manufacturing industry that is in the middle. That is so it's looking at the holistic picture. Yes, we can break it down and say, okay, this is good, these trends are good. But together, we need to see that we're moving in the right direction. And we estimate that Nigeria needs to be growing at about 6 to 8% for the impact to really be felt. So you have what you call the GDP per capita, which is spread. Take that GDP growth, take that GDP whole real number, and sort of divide it across the population, and it doesn't amount to much. And so, is it translating to better, increased standards, human development, uptake in human development indices? The answer is no.
Right, and which really is the crux of the matter. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yes.
That's what the layman is concerned about. That's what every average Nigerian is concerned about. So, of course, a step in the right direction, but still a lot more work to be done.
Precisely.
Talking about services, which you highlighted earlier, let's segue from that to looking at the FCPCC recently coming out offering a 1-month moratorium to traders to crash prices of goods. Do you believe that this is going to be an effective move?
So I just first want to say that the Competition Commission just woke up one morning and chose violence, because prior to 6 months ago, I don't think they made headlines like in 10 years, maybe once or twice. And now in 3 months, we heard about them in the Meta case. Now they're coming here. And I think this is probably attributable to the appointment of the new CEO, Tunji Bello. So I'm actually excited to see what direction they're going to go to. But to answer your question, so I think my concern with that is it an effective, so the goal is right, he gave this scenario where he said that there was a particular blender, the Ninja blender, which is sold at $89 in Texas, which translates to $140, yet a supermarket in VI was selling that same product for about over $944K, which is exorbitant, agreeable, but it's failing to take into consideration all of the different processes that is going into importing a product. So it's not just, so even in the US and the UK, the prices are not equal to the same thing. So if you have a product that is $84, it's going to be £84 rather than being 70-something or 60-something that is the direct exchange rate one-to-one or whatever it is that the exchange rate is at the time. And I think that my concern regarding this sort of targeted approach is I want to see what they're doing about collusion and price fixing. If there is no evidence of collusion and price fixing, it's a free market. Anybody can set the price whatsoever way that they want. To say that, okay, you need to crash your price because 1, 2, 3. First of all, you need to take into consideration the hustle to get Forex to import. Second of all, you need to take into consideration the hustle again to clear your product at the port. And so those are the factors that are put into the price, that is transferred into the price. It's intangible. You can't say, okay, this is how much I spent. But in the human hours and the resources that went into bringing that product, procuring that product into the country, that has to be factored into the price. Now, is $944 the accurate price? Probably not. But at the same time, it's a free market. Anybody can set the price. If there's evidence of collusion within different groups, so I know sometimes you go to the market and everybody's quoting the same price for you, like they all agree that morning that this is how much you're going to sell it. So I do agree that there's some level of price fixing, but I would like the same research that they put into Meta, that they did their homework. I would like for them to do their homework as opposed to just telling people to crash their prices. What does that even mean? It's a market economy. Everyone is free to do whatever they want.
Shirley, I mean, in line with the point you just made, we've seen the National Association of Nigerian Traders also come out to express that charges on imported goods at the ports is really exorbitant and plays a significant role in the price surge that we see. Do you, in the event that, 1 month is going to be is very around the corner, in the event that they don't meet up to this, what do you believe the ramifications of these actions will be?
So, I mean, he did say, that, Mr. Bello did say that they weren't going to be punitive. They were going to give them a chance to, enter some sort of dialogue. So I do believe that they will probably take the dialogue approach and maybe bring some economists to the table to do some level of analysis to understand the extent that these prices are overpriced and to sort of put a mark on where it needs to be. But the fundamentals are still the same. And so this takes me back to, conversation about what the Competition Commission should be focused on. They should be focused on price collusion. They should be focused on monopolies rather than targeting, traders or whatever it is on single items. So I don't know the full picture. I won't be surprised if they've done some sort of investigation and they have an internal document that they're working with. But what they've told us so far is not good enough to go by. It's not a lot of substance there, and I'm wary of them going in this because it would then be sort of scapegoat. So we target this person, this shop, and that's
I mean, sustainability and long-term effects are also just as important. So we don't want like just band-aid, reflexes around it. We have very little time left. Let's look at the Bank of China President Liu Jin's resignation very briefly, please. Of course, we know that this is a position that was held since 2021. What circumstances shroud this resignation? Because, of course, this is also following a previous step down just last year. Let's talk about it very briefly.
So just very quickly, Bank of China is one of the largest commercial banks in the world. And so that actually has an impact. So what is happening with the banking sector in China? There's been a crisis over the last years that stems from the property market being on decline and how there's been weaker demand in the country. But that actually also has an impact on infrastructure because we know that China has positioned itself as a financier of African infrastructure and what that means for us. But there's also a conversation about corruption and financial impropriety. Like you said, the chairman stepping down for taking bribes. Although this Mr. Liu, who stepped down now, has stated personal reasons. Just shortly after they changed their auditor, PwC was given a ban, a 6-month ban by the Chinese government, and so there's some speculation that this could potentially be tied to maybe some implication or indictment in fraud or financial impropriety, because in April, the government launched a nationwide investigation into the banking financial sector to investigate fraud and sort of some of the, whether it's money laundering or whatever bribes that has been going on under the table. And there's some speculations. It's still just speculations at the moment. We don't have concrete answers just yet that this is linked to that. But I think it also just speaks broader to the pinch in the Chinese economy.
Right, and of course the role of the financial watchdog as well, and checks and balances. We see something happening there.
Exactly.
Damilare, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning on Business Week. Many thanks.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll see you again very soon.